Hello students, welcome back to our discussion of Chapter 11. Just finishing up a few slides here. Going back to this one, we ended this one second video, but host government demands, another pressure for local responsiveness. Use an example of prescription drugs in Canada. Other drugs are available in other countries that don't require that prescription. Why can you buy a product in one country but not the other country? Why can you buy, for example, a Kinder Egg in Canada but it's illegal to have it in the United States? If they want to produce or sell that product in the United States, they have to wrap it up differently, for example. And there's other products that are like that. Eggs, for example, big global difference. Found this article to reinforce that. Because in Europe and other parts of the world, the eggs that you buy do not have to be refrigerated, whereas in Canada, North America, it is more appropriate to or required to refrigerate them. So another example of differences in countries. As it says here, without the cuticle, eggs must be refrigerated to combat bacterial infection from inside. In Europe, it's illegal to wash eggs, and instead farms vaccinate chickens against salmonella. With the cuticle intact, refrigeration could cause mildew growth and contamination. So different than in Canada and the US. So just one of the many differences that require firms and organizations, industries to respond to local differences. Some more on differences due to consumer taste and preferences. Pickup trucks, as it says there, are considered a second car, whereas in Europe trucks are considered utility vehicles. So generally you don't drive trucks in Europe because they would be considered a work truck. In the United Arab Emirates, when I was there, you could not buy a pickup truck. Pickup trucks were reserved for employment and company use. If you had one, it would be seen as you were using it for work purposes, and that could invalidate your work visa. So choosing a strategy. There are 4 different strategies firms can undertake to become more competitive and more successful. So these 4 basic strategies we'll go over in more detail. This becomes probably the most important part of this chapter in terms of definite couple short answer type questions from here in terms of here's a situation, what kind of strategy are they following? So the 4 basic strategies are based on either being the cost pressure, having high cost pressure or low cost pressure, or pressures for local responsiveness. So this is how they would fit in. And of course, in real life situations, we're going to have companies throughout this matrix, but generally more that are leaned towards being, having a significant cost pressure or pressure to reduce costs, and low pressure for being locally responsive, puts them into that global strategy mix. So we'll go over these in more detail. We'll first start off with that international strategy. So low cost pressure, there's not a lot of pressure to maintain low costs, and there's not a lot of pressure to be locally responsive. So in this strategy, there is limited customization. Head office retains tight control over marketing and product strategy. McDonald's Canada, for example, McCain Foods Canada. So the operations that exist in Canada, basically advertisements, marketing campaigns are for Canada as a whole. Product development, new product development is going to be introduced in Canada as a whole. There's really no difference in terms of going to McDonald's in in Vancouver versus McDonald's in Toronto. A multi-domestic strategy. So this one has significant pressures to be different, but their cost pressures, their pressures to maintain a low cost, are still low. So in this strategy, they can achieve that maximum local responsiveness. Customizable product offering and marketing strategies. They establish a complete set of value creation activities in each major national market because they have to be different or respond to local demands to be different. So each major nation or major network is going to have their own value creation activities. Some of the weaknesses: poor job or leveraging core competencies within the firm. They're not going to learn from what each major market is doing. High cost structure. So generally they do have high costs if they have to be locally different, and if they have to then do that by having each of a different set of value creation activities in those markets, then yeah, it's going to add to their costs. Many have developed into decentralized entities with autonomous power. The example of that is the VCR format war. The third type, there was VHS versus Beta versus Philips NV in the 1970s, the third VCR format type. What the problem was that they failed to ensure that its U.S. subsidiary adopted its own format. But instead, the U.S. group went with the VHS format, so their own entity within their organization decided to go with their competitor. Auto manufacturing is an example of this multi-domestic strategy. Global strategy. So there is significant pressures to reduce costs, but there are low pressures to be different, to offer that differentiated product. Benefits, they gain benefits from that experience curve and location economies. Value chain activities are centered in key locations. So generally they don't customize their product offering or offer different marketing strategies. Examples: Intel and Motorola will be an example of that. Transnational strategy. So there is significant costs to be different, plus significant cost pressures. Global learning. Home office and subsidiaries are each learning from each other. Skills, for example, are learned from each other, not just from top down, but from bottom up as well. Firms are trying to achieve cost and differentiation advantages at the same time. Caterpillar is an example. If you look at their history, they've had to, because of faced with certain cost pressures and competition, they were also faced with the need to be locally responsive. So at a time they had to develop something that was unique for different marketplaces, but also had to keep their costs in line as well. So those are the 4 different strategies and a little introduction into them. Next slide talks about some of the advantages and disadvantages of the 4 strategies. So that's something you can review. I'm not going to spend time in the video going over the advantages and disadvantages, but it's important to understand what those strategies are, and what in terms of a scenario, what that strategy is for that scenario. And then your chapter finishes up with some strategic alliances basically cooperative agreements between potential or actual competitors concerned with that strategic alliance between firms from different countries. Generally, there are some significant advantages to have that strategic alliance. If you are going to expand operations into a foreign market, it has a stronger chance of succeeding if you are forming an alliance with someone who's on that who's in that market already. And there are some benefits or advantages of that strategic alliance. So you're not going over there and taking over, perhaps like Canadian Tire did to the White stores in the mid-80s, or what Target did with Zellers, where they came over and they acquire. Strategic alliance, more of a merger. You have someone on this side who is more familiar with the political, economic, legal differences and market differences as well, consumer trends, for example. So it's going to facilitate entry into that foreign market, allow firms to share the fixed costs and risks of developing new products or processes. So you bring together each other's skills and assets, and there's some technological sharing reasons as well. The disadvantages, as it says there, you can give your competitors that low-cost route to new technology and markets. Basically, if you're the one there that's bringing in a core competency, and now you are allowing that strategic partnership alliance to know about that and learn about that and use it, and after the perhaps if things go sour and you split, your competitors may have access to some of the core competencies. So you can give away more than you receive. And a little bit about how to make that alliance work, just with any type of business partnership. Selecting the right partner, the right structure, and of course managing the whole alliance, trust and learning from each other. And that is it for Chapter 11.